I Love Lucy isn't just a classic sitcom, it's a piece of television history. With its groundbreaking comedy, unforgettable performances, and the magnetic charm of Lucille Ball and Desi Arnas, the show became a cultural phenomenon that continues to captivate audiences decades later. But while the laughter lives on, time has taken its toll on the beloved cast. In this video, we pay tribute to the actors who made I Love Lucy so special and who have sadly passed away. From major stars to memorable supporting roles, we honor their contributions, share the stories behind their lives, and reflect on the legacy they left behind. Join us as we remember the faces that brought so much joy to millions and whose impact on television will never be forgotten. Lucille Ball, born August 6, 1911, began portraying Lucy Ricardo in I Love Lucy in 1951 at the age of 40. As the red-headed whirlwind of domestic chaos, Lucy Ricardo was bold, zany, and impossible to ignore, traits not far removed from Ball herself. But behind Lucy's lovable desperation for stardom was a real woman driven by control, ambition, and a gnawing fear of irrelevance. Born into hardship in Jamestown, New York, Ball lost her father at age 3 and was shuffled between unstable relatives, often feeling unwanted. Her teenage years were a blur of modeling failures and rejections. Her classmates called her cement head, mocking her for being slow. That emotional bruise never left her. In Hollywood, Ball clawed her way up, enduring a string of B-movie flops before hitting it big. But success came with cost. She tolerated Desi Arnas's serial infidelity for years, once hiring a private investigator who caught him in bed with 2 dancers. Still, she stayed, fearing a single mother's reputation would tarnish her empire. The couple's tumultuous relationship fed into their on-screen magic, but the off-screen tension was brutal. Screaming matches, vodka-fueled arguments, and nights Ball locked herself in her room, sobbing. After the divorce, Ball kept Desilu Productions alive through sheer willpower, but not without scandal. She was accused of blacklisting a writer she believed was trying to upstage her, and several insiders claimed Ball manipulated scripts to limit other female roles. Her biggest failure came in 1968 with Here's Lucy, which flopped critically. Some said it exposed her comedic timing had waned and that she couldn't adapt to the counterculture era. Toward the end of her life, Ball was plagued by loneliness and health issues. After Desi's death in 1986, she spiraled emotionally and her heart problems worsened. On April 26, 1989, Lucille Ball died at 77 from a ruptured abdominal aortic aneurysm in Los Angeles. She left behind an empire, including Desilu's legacy, Beverly Hills real estate, and a collection of television rights valued at over $40 million. Vivien Vance, born July 26, 1909, brought the iconic Ethel Mertz to life in I Love Lucy, starting in 1951 at age 42. As Lucy's steadfast best friend, Ethel was the perfect comedic balance, sarcastic, sensible, and often reluctantly complicit in Lucy's harebrained schemes. But behind her on-screen loyalty, Vance fought silent wars, both on set and in her private life. Her chemistry with Lucille Ball masked a painful truth. Vance's existence was often treated as expendable. Born into a repressive and emotionally abusive household in Kansas, Vance was belittled for her appearance and told she'd never be loved. Her mother once called her too plain to matter. This trauma followed her into adulthood, where she endured multiple abusive marriages, the worst with her second husband, who reportedly beat her for gaining weight. Hollywood's cruelty only compounded the damage. Vance was forced into a clause banning her from losing weight to maintain the physical contrast between herself and the more glamorous Ball. Her most public feud was with William Frolley, who played Fred Mertz. The two despised each other, with Frolley once calling her a fat cow off camera. Rumors swirled that Vance begged producers to kill off Fred just to avoid working with him. Off-screen, she battled severe depression, exacerbated by a sense of creative stagnation. She longed for more serious roles, but Hollywood saw her only as Ethel. Her greatest professional disappointment came when she was passed over for a lead in a 1960s stage revival due to her mental health struggles. Vance self-medicated with alcohol and prescription pills for years. Though close to Ball, Their friendship was at times strained. Ball allegedly grew jealous when Vance received stronger laughs in rehearsals. Diagnosed with breast cancer in the mid-1970s, Vance fought quietly, but the disease metastasized. On August 17, 1979, she died at 70 in her Belvedere, California, home. Her net worth was a modest $1 million, a shock given her fame, but unsurprising given the era's exploitative contracts and her supporting role status. William Frolley was born on February 26, 1887, and took on the role of Fred Mertz in I Love Lucy in 1951 at the age of 64. He played the grouchy, tight-fisted landlord with a checkered vaudeville past and endless deadpan comebacks, becoming a staple in American television households. But the man behind Fred Mertz was far from lovable. Frolley was notorious in Hollywood circles for being an unpredictable, heavy-drinking brawler with a reputation for sabotaging professional relationships. Raised in a rigid Irish Catholic household in Burlington, Iowa, Frolley's early years were bleak. His father was emotionally distant, and his mother allegedly beat him with a wooden spoon for minor disobedience. He ran away from home at 16, sleeping in freight yards while trying to hustle singing gigs in seedy theaters. His rise to screen fame was delayed by decades of bar fights, arrests, and missed opportunities due to his alcoholism, which almost cost him the I Love Lucy job. Desi Arnas reportedly hired him under the condition that if he ever showed up to set drunk, he'd be immediately fired. Frolley complied, but only barely, often sobering up minutes before cameras rolled. His bitter feud with Vivien Vance became legendary. He despised her elitist attitude, and she once referred to him as a foul-smelling old man, to which Frolley responded by chucking empty film canisters at her dressing room door. Their mutual loathing was so profound that Vance refused to attend his funeral. Despite his Emmy nominations, Frolley's career tanked post-Lucy, partially due to being blackballed for erratic behavior on other sets. His love life was equally tragic. He never married, and former lovers described him as emotionally cruel and obsessively jealous. His final years were spent alone at the Knickerbocker Hotel, playing poker with washed-up studio men and slowly drinking himself into silence. On March 3, 1966, he collapsed from a heart attack while walking home from a movie in Hollywood. He was 79. At the time of his death, his estate was worth around $500,000, shockingly low for someone with over 100 film credits. Doris Singleton was born on September 28, 1919, and joined I Love Lucy in 1953 at the age of 34 as Caroline Appleby, the subtle nemesis of Lucy Ricardo. Singleton's portrayal of the haughty, competitive, and quietly vindictive Caroline gave viewers a sharp reflection of post-war suburban rivalries. Yet beneath her polished image was a story few ever knew. Doris grew up in a rigid, emotionally repressive home in Brooklyn, raised by a domineering mother who forbade any emotional displays. As a child, she was not allowed to cry, and she learned to mask sadness with grace, a skill that later translated into her flawless, composed screen persona. Behind the scenes, Singleton often struggled with being overlooked in Hollywood despite decades of work. She battled depression in private and confided in Lucille Ball during late-night calls that she felt like wallpaper in the industry. Despite being respected by peers, she never landed a lead role and was frequently typecast as the cold woman, which she resented deeply. Her transition from ballet and singing to acting wasn't as glamorous as it seemed. She turned to TV after her voice was damaged by a respiratory illness in the 1940s, crushing her dreams of a music career. Though her marriage to comedy writer Charles Isaacs was long-lasting, it wasn't always peaceful. He reportedly disapproved of her continued work in later years, pushing her to retire. Singleton's most heartbreaking moment came when she was passed over for a major role in Here's Lucy, a decision she believed was due to industry ageism and not merit. In her final years, she withdrew from the public eye, spending most of her time caring for her husband, who suffered from dementia. Doris Singleton died on June 26, 2012, at age 92 from complications of cancer in Los Angeles. Her estate, comprised of small investments, property, and royalties, was valued at $1 to $2 million. Though never a household name, Singleton's legacy lives in the quiet force of a woman who smiled through decades of rejection and still managed to shine. Desi Arnas, born March 2, 1917, took on the role of Ricky Ricardo in I Love Lucy in 1951, when he was just 34. As Lucy's Cuban bandleader husband, Ricky was quick-tempered, deeply affectionate, and comically baffled by his wife's mischief. His charisma on screen was undeniable, but Arnaz's real life was far more chaotic. Born into Cuban aristocracy, his family fled to Miami during the Cuban Revolution, leaving behind immense wealth and political power. Raised in exile and humiliation, Desi carried deep resentment and a hunger to reclaim status through fame. He fought his way into Hollywood with charm and cunning, but also with demons. While co-founding Desilu Productions with Ball, Arnaz revolutionized TV filming techniques, but he was also a compulsive drinker, gambler, and serial womanizer. Insiders often found him passed out on set or flirting shamelessly with extras. His infidelity was notorious. One scandal involved a 19-year-old showgirl found in his dressing room during a rehearsal, leading to a near cancellation of the series. His worst professional failure came post-Lucy, when he attempted to launch The Desi Arnas Show, which was canceled after only one season amid poor ratings and backstage turmoil. Arnas struggled with health, especially liver problems, exacerbated by decades of alcohol abuse. His marriage to Lucille Ball, while iconic, was a powder keg. Lucille once allegedly discovered him in bed with another woman just hours before taping an episode. Their children grew up in a home filled with screaming, secrets, and emotional neglect. After the divorce, Arnas withdrew from public life, rarely seen without a drink in hand. He remarried but remained haunted by regret over Lucy. In 1986, he was diagnosed with lung cancer, and on December 2nd of that year, he died at 69 in Del Mar, California. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at $20 million, thanks largely to Desilu stock and residuals. Herb Vigran was born on June 5, 1910, and made his debut in I Love Lucy in 1952 at the age of 42, playing Jewel and other fast-talking, comical figures like the promoter behind Lucy and Ethel's Martian publicity stunt. His wiry frame, frantic gestures, and expressive eyebrows made him a perfect fit for mid-century television farces. But Vigran's story was as layered as his performances. He was born to Russian Jewish immigrants in Cincinnati, Ohio, and his early years were marked by anti-Semitic bullying and isolation. A prodigy, he graduated from law school by 21, but a yearning for applause overruled courtroom ambition. Though he was never a leading man, Vigran appeared in over 350 productions, typecast as shopkeepers, barkeeps, and henpecked husbands. But his prolific output masked an exhausting inner battle. Vigran allegedly suffered from chronic anxiety and panic attacks, often requiring multiple takes. Co-stars described him as genius in the first take, wreckage by the third. Despite his comedic roles, his off-screen persona was intensely serious, bordering on morose. He was known to meticulously rewrite scenes he wasn't even in, which infuriated directors. His worst career moment came when he publicly criticized Lucille Ball's leadership style in a backstage interview, causing a temporary rift with CBS and costing him roles on 2 other sitcoms. He married once, to an aspiring actress who left him after 4 years, citing emotional coldness and workaholism. They had no children. In his later years, he battled throat cancer, which he tragically saw as cosmic punishment for giving up the law to chase fame. He died on November 29, 1986, at age 76. His estate, modest but orderly, was valued at under $500,000, consisting largely of union savings and a small Beverly Hills condo. Though never a star, Vigran became a footnote in the golden age of television, ubiquitous, dependable, and quietly haunted by the fear that being everywhere still meant being invisible. Jerry Housener was born on May 20, 1909, and stepped into I Love Lucy in 1951 as Jerry, Ricky Ricardo's fast-talking agent, at the age of 42. Though a secondary character, His presence injected realism into the showbiz backdrop of the series, making him a vital, if underappreciated, cog in the show's machine. But unlike many of his contemporaries, Housener never sought the spotlight. Raised in Cleveland in a broken home, his father left when he was 6. Housener grew up with a fierce need for control. He channeled this into voice acting and behind-the-scenes work, especially as a dialogue director for cartoons, where he was known to be ruthlessly perfectionistic and impatient with less experienced actors. Colleagues admired his sharp timing, but whispered about his frequent temper tantrums during voice sessions. Despite never facing public scandal, internal memos from studios described him as exhausting to direct and abrasive with female colleagues. His biggest professional embarrassment occurred in the 1960s when he was passed over for a lead voice role in a major animated feature, allegedly due to a hostile confrontation with the film's producer during a casting dispute. While his marriage to Velma McCall was seen as stable, close friends revealed she quietly separated from him in the late 70s, citing his emotional detachment and workaholic obsession. He never had children, and former associates often described him as brilliant but empty, driven more by fear of irrelevance than passion. As animation moved into the blockbuster era, Housener was left behind, his old-school voice and direction style no longer in demand. He died of congestive heart failure on April 1, 1993, at the age of 83, largely forgotten by the public. His net worth was never officially disclosed but was believed to be modest, likely under $300,000. No funeral was publicly held, and his death barely warranted an obituary. Though his voice graced dozens of cartoon classics, the man himself disappeared without a sound. Frank Nelson was born on May 6, 1911, and took on multiple roles in I Love Lucy, beginning in 1951 at the age of 40. He played a variety of condescending, over-the-top characters, most famously the smug Freddie Fillmore, whose snide "e's" became a pop culture staple. But behind that iconic smirk was a man whose presence in Hollywood was far more complicated than the breezy humor suggested. Raised in a deeply dysfunctional household in Colorado, Nelson was estranged from his father, an alcoholic who reportedly abandoned the family when Frank was just 9. His early life was riddled with insecurity, and classmates often mocked his nasal voice and overly dramatic demeanor, wounds that would later fuel the biting sarcasm in his comedy. Though he became a staple of radio and television, Nelson's career had sharp edges. He was deeply involved in AFTRA's internal politics, and while praised for securing pension benefits, was accused by some colleagues of bullying dissenters and blacklisting those who opposed his union stances. His reputation for being hard-nosed extended to the studio lots. Directors often avoided giving him recurring parts due to his notorious habit of rewriting punchlines on set to outshine leading actors. One of his biggest career failures came when CBS dropped him from a 1955 spin-off pilot after complaints from multiple cast members about verbal aggression. Nelson was married, but his relationship was anything but idyllic. Private letters revealed posthumously detailed accounts of prolonged emotional distance, and rumors swirled for decades about extramarital affairs with aspiring actresses whom he allegedly promised roles. After being diagnosed with cancer in the late 70s, Nelson continued working in voiceover just to keep his sagey health coverage active. He died on September 12, 1986, at the age of 75, following a long and painful battle with cancer. His net worth at the time of death was modest, estimated at under $300,000, consisting mainly of union benefits and residuals. Catherine Card was born on October 4, 1892, and stepped into the role of Mrs. McGillicuddy on I Love Lucy in 1954 at the age of 62. Audiences adored her character's absent-minded charm, confusing names, misplacing facts, and turning even the simplest conversation into comedic chaos. But what fans didn't see was a woman nursing a lifetime of grief behind her impeccable comic timing. Card's childhood in Butte, Montana was marred by domestic poverty and emotional neglect. Her father, a failed prospector with violent tendencies, abandoned the family when she was 9, leaving Catherine and her mother to survive on sewing work and charity. This early instability shaped her rigid emotional control and relentless work ethic. By the 1920s, Card had become a fixture in radio drama, but television eluded her until later in life, mostly due to industry bias against older women who didn't fit the mold. She endured countless rejections and was once replaced from a recurring series just days before filming, allegedly for being too grandmotherly, despite the role being a grandmother. Though never embroiled in public scandal, she was privately regarded as cold and obsessive about perfection, with rumors that she would rehearse lines for hours alone in dressing rooms and avoid speaking with castmates unless absolutely necessary. The biggest heartbreak of her life was the death of her only child at the age of 5 from polio, an event she never publicly discussed, but which friends say haunted her until her death. Card lived frugally, often wearing the same wardrobe for years and refusing to travel or socialize. She died from a heart attack on March 1, 1964, at the age of 71, alone in a modest Hollywood apartment. Her estate, which included a small savings account and residuals from I Love Lucy and earlier radio work, was valued at under $100,000. Despite her minor screen time, Card's performance left a permanent mark on 1950s television, though the quiet storm of grief beneath her smile remains a footnote few ever explored. Ross Elliot was born on June 18, 1917, and appeared in I Love Lucy in 1952 at age 35, playing the sharply dressed publicity man in the iconic Vida Mia de Vegaman episode, and later as Ricky Ricardo's long-suffering agent. Charming and urbane on screen, Elliot exuded professionalism. Yet behind the poised smile was a man weighed down by ambition and hidden resentments. Raised in New York by an emotionally distant father who pushed him toward engineering, Elliot rejected convention early, running away to study theater and briefly joining Orson Welles' Mercury Theater. Though this connection launched his career, it also cast a long shadow. He was always compared to more successful Mercury alums like Joseph Cotten and Vincent Price. He reportedly felt underappreciated, believing his talent was overlooked due to his refusal to play Hollywood's political games. His career was steady but never explosive, and he often privately mocked the very sitcoms that paid his bills. Former colleagues described him as polite but icy, known for cutting remarks and a ruthless memory for slights. His most crushing disappointment came in 1961 when he was cast, then replaced last minute in a prominent Broadway revival due to creative disagreements, a professional humiliation he never forgot. Though publicly scandal-free, insiders spoke of a controlling nature and rumored affairs with young stage assistants during his theater years. Married briefly in the 1950s, he quietly divorced and never remarried, citing the incompatibility of true art and domesticity. In later years, Elliot retreated from acting, focusing instead on behind-the-scenes roles in the Academy, where he was said to be a fierce gatekeeper who blocked rivals. Diagnosed with cancer in the late 90s, he died on August 12, 1999, at age 82. His estate, well managed, was valued between $1 to $2 million, including classic film memorabilia, real estate investments, and royalties from television reruns. He died respected but not beloved, a figure who moved with elegance but left a chill in every room he exited. Mary Jane Croft was born on February 15, 1916, and joined I Love Lucy in 1954 at the age of 38, portraying Betty Ramsey, Lucy's elegant but oblivious neighbor. Croft's poise and precise comic delivery made her an ideal foil to Lucy's chaos, and her upper-crust demeanor was a constant reminder of how status and class played into 1950s comedy. Yet beneath the pristine posture and gracious smile was a woman navigating a lifetime of emotional trauma and career desperation. Raised in Ohio by a deeply religious family, Croft was punished for pursuing the performing arts, with her parents frequently threatening to commit her to a sanitarium for her wild aspirations. She fled home at 16, working as a traveling theater actress before finding her voice, literally in radio. Croft became a master of character voices, But her transition to television was filled with anxiety and rejection. She often clashed with producers, demanding script rewrites and even refusing to wear certain costumes she deemed demeaning to women. She had a reputation for being uncooperative, once walking off a radio program mid-broadcast after accusing the male lead of belittling her lines. But her most devastating chapter came when her only son, a U.S. soldier, was killed in the Vietnam War in 1969. Croft never recovered. She withdrew from Hollywood for over a decade and reportedly developed agoraphobia, refusing to leave her home without sedatives. Although she returned to voice work in the late 80s, her career never regained momentum. Croft died on August 24, 1999, at age 83, from natural causes at her home in Century City. Her estate, a mix of moderate property holdings and residuals from syndication, was valued under $1 million. She remains an underappreciated figure in TV history, an actress of rare range, forever scarred by loss and buried beneath the polite applause of nostalgia. Elizabeth Patterson was born on November 22, 1874, and joined I Love Lucy in 1952 at age 78, portraying the no-nonsense Mrs. Matilda Trumbull, the Ricardos' prickly neighbor turned beloved babysitter. Her character was stern but heartwarming, offering a rare portrayal of older women as sharp, relevant, and vital, a reflection of Patterson's own tenacity. Raised in a devout Southern family in Savannah, Tennessee, Patterson rebelled early against her strict Presbyterian parents, who disowned her when she ran off to pursue theater in Chicago. Her early career was a revolving door of rejections and humiliations, including a brief stint with a traveling burlesque troupe under a false name. Patterson never married and was rumored to have carried on multiple long-term affairs with married men in the industry, a bold transgression for a woman of her era. She famously turned down a marriage proposal from a wealthy Chicago banker, allegedly because he thought acting was indecent. Though she worked steadily in films, she was often relegated to spinster roles, which fueled a quiet bitterness. Her biggest heartbreak came in the late 1930s, when a leading stage role she'd nurtured for years was handed to a younger actress with no experience but significant studio connections. On set, Patterson was gracious but intensely private. Rumors swirled of her using pseudonyms to stay in boarding houses and evading social invitations from her co-stars. She lived her final 35 years at the Roosevelt Hotel, alone, surrounded by stacks of old scripts, yellowed fan letters, and carefully arranged photographs of the few friends she allowed into her inner circle. She died of pneumonia on January 31, 1966, at the age of 91. Her estate was minimal, estimated at under $100,000, and consisted mostly of modest savings in old stage costumes. Patterson was quietly cremated, her ashes scattered without ceremony. Despite her obscurity at death, her face endures in reruns, forever watching over the Ricardos the way no one ever watched over her. Richard Reeves was born on August 10, 1912, and began appearing in I Love Lucy in 1951 at the age of 39. With his massive build and brooding eyes, Reeves was the go-to heavy, mobster, thug, bouncer, hitman, his presence always a warning of trouble ahead. But behind his gruff typecasting was a man trapped by demons far more menacing than any TV villain. Reeves, a World War II veteran who served in the Pacific Theater, returned from combat with severe PTSD at a time when such afflictions were either dismissed or treated with bourbon. He began drinking heavily in the late 40s, and by the time he hit the Lucy set, he was already known among crew members for sneaking gin into his morning coffee. His alcoholism wasn't a well-kept secret. He once passed out during a scene rehearsal, and in 1956, he was quietly blacklisted from 3 major television projects after an altercation with a casting agent who refused to recast him for a clean-cut role. He was married twice, both short-lived, and had no children, though tabloids once speculated about an affair with a married actress in the 1950s, a rumor Reeves never denied. His most humiliating professional blow came when he was recast at the last minute in a major noir film due to fears he was uninsurable after several on-set incidents. Still, he worked incessantly, dozens of films, guest roles, anything that kept him moving. Ironically, it was this tireless work schedule, not fame, that made him wealthy. By the time he died on March 17, 1967, from cirrhosis of the liver, he had amassed a net worth of approximately $3 million, primarily from careful investing in real estate, not acting. He died at 54, alone in a rented bungalow in Venice, California, his last days spent in near isolation. Reeves left behind a legacy not of artistry, but of raw persistence, forever typecast, and ultimately consumed by the persona he once despised. Barbara Pepper was born on May 31, 1915, and first appeared in I Love Lucy in 1952 at the age of 37, usually playing minor characters or background figures at social gatherings. But behind her limited screen time was a tragic tale of missed chances, addiction, and quiet suffering. Barbara's early years were marked by heartbreak. She was orphaned as a teenager and sent to live in a convent school where she was reportedly bullied for her rebellious nature and developing curves. She ran away at 17 and joined the Ziegfeld Follies, quickly becoming known for her bawdy sense of humor and fearless attitude. Hollywood came calling, and she landed roles in the 1930s, but her career began to unravel when she married actor Craig Reynolds. Their passionate but tumultuous marriage ended in devastation when Reynolds died in a motorcycle accident in 1949, leaving Barbara alone with 2 young children. Consumed by grief, she turned to alcohol and prescription pills. By the time I Love Lucy was casting in the early 50s, she was Lucille Ball's first choice for Ethel Mertz, until the producers vetoed it, citing her unreliable health and weight issues. The rejection shattered her. While William Frolley, also a heavy drinker, was given a second chance, Pepper was cast aside. Her roles shrank to one-liners and cameos. She often begged Ball for work and was quietly supported financially by old friends when her drinking worsened. Her behavior became increasingly erratic. One crew member recalled how she once showed up to a Petticoat Junction, taping disoriented and barefoot. Barbara's biggest failure was her inability to secure stable work in her final decade, resorting to live readings and the occasional bit part to survive. She died on July 18, 1969, at the age of 54 from coronary thrombosis in Panorama City, California. At the time of her death, she had less than $100,000 to her name, mostly in personal items and Social Security. Pepper's life is remembered by those who knew her as a cautionary tale of early promise, undermined by grief, addiction, and an industry that turned its back when she needed help the most. Thank you for watching as we reflected on the lives and legacies of the actors from I Love Lucy who are no longer with us. Their humor, charm, and unforgettable performances brought joy to millions and helped shape the show into a classic. While their journeys ended far too soon, their impact lives on through every scene, every laugh, and every memory they've left behind. As we honor their lives, we're reminded of how deeply television can touch our hearts. Join us next time as we look back at more stars who left us too soon, but whose stories continue to shine.